It's every mother's worst fear to outlive their child. But when that child's death is brought about by an act of brutality, the pain can be almost crippling. Add to that sensationalized reporting, cries of a hate crime, and a whirlwind of publicity, and you have just a taste of what happened in the Matthew Shepard case. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on Interviews, our conversation with Matthew Shepard's mother, Judy Shepard. How do you keep from letting anger and hate overtake your life?
Well, it was a family decision. I know it sounds like a simple answer, but we had a meeting and we just knew that if we went down that road of anger and hate, that we'd be victims too. And I just wasn't going to give anybody that kind of power.
How long does it take, though, to come to that realization?
About 15 minutes.
Really?
It's a conscious decision for us. It was a conscious decision to just not allow ourselves to go there. I'm sure that doesn't work for everybody, but it's sort of been the way I've lived my life, and I guess my family too.
How does that work different than a public face, a private face? Is there a private time where you can let all of that out, or is that just totally where you're at?
Well, yeah, there's a private time, but it's more lent to missing Matt than feeling any anger. I didn't want to be in that dark place. I knew that I couldn't help other families or other Matts or myself if I was in that dark place. So I never go there. I don't feel the need to go there.
How soon after all of this did you realize you could help other people?
Well, it was kind of a long process, really. When we first started getting the mail when Matt was in the hospital, a lot of the letters said, please use this opportunity to help us. And at the time, I didn't really know what that meant. It wasn't until a few months later when I realized that it was still in the news and we were still getting mail and people were still inquiring about Matt and us and the situation before the trials were even underway, that maybe we had an opportunity to speak out on a national platform. And there were other people involved in that. Elizabeth Birch with the Human Rights Campaign was instrumental in showing me that I could do this and I should do this. So she was really helpful in just sort of pushing me out there to see.
There's got to be a time in all of that when you're saying, hey, leave me alone, I don't want this.
Well, it took a trip back to Saudi and talks with Dennis to realize that I couldn't do nothing. I had to do something. I didn't want another family to go through this, and if there was anything I could do to help educate the public or even educate one person in an audience I might have, then I had to do that. I would want another family to do that for my family.
Yeah.
So that's I guess what kept me going and keeps me going still. Is I would want another mother to speak out to help my situation and my child have a better future.
Take me back, if you can, and fill me in a little bit about what happened, what led up to all of this.
Well, Matt was murdered in October 98, singled out because he was gay for a robbery, and then it just escalated into a display of hate that was unbelievable. It captured the news for months. It captured audiences because Matt had been found later still alive out in the prairie tied to a fence. There was a lot of outcry of the level of violence and why it happened and where it happened, and there was a confluence of events that just kept it in the news.
How did you find out about it?
We were living in Saudi at the time, and we got a phone call in the very early hours of the morning to tell us that Matt was in the hospital in a coma in critical condition. They had very little hope of his survival, but they didn't exactly communicate that to us on the phone. They just told us we needed to come home. So we began hours of arranging flights and transportation papers and the like out of Saudi. It took us 19 hours to get on a plane, and it was a 25-hour trip once we got started.
What went through your mind during that? I mean, you didn't have enough information to really know all of what was going on, did you?
No, we had no idea why it had happened. Really, all we knew was that he was critically injured. So we did a lot of thinking and crying and mulling over what we were going to do. understanding also that we may have to make a decision about life support once we got to be with him. We just wanted him to still be with us when we got there. We didn't want him to be suffering in any way. So there was a lot of discussion about that, how our other families were going to, what our other family members were going to do, where we were going to meet up. We had no idea what we were going to discover when we got to the States.
Yeah. At a moment like that, what did you learn about yourself?
The capacity to deal with tragedy comes from somewhere. Dennis and I both went into this very efficient mode of understanding there were things that we had to do. And so you sort of put things that are out of your control in a separate place to deal with things that are still in your control that you know you have to do, because there's nothing you can do for this other little piece yet. So you become very, almost robotic in dealing with issues that need your attention and that cannot be influenced by your emotions.
How do you think you learned to do that? How did you know to do that in that situation?
I don't know. Maybe it's being a parent. I don't know. It just happened.
And I ask so much about that because I see how something like that, or believe something like that, can totally tear you down.
Yeah.
And yet you were able to get through it, and that's what fascinates me.
We understood that Matt needed us. You can't let yourself come apart when you know that your son is dying and you have other family members to care for. You can't just allow yourself to come apart. There's work to be done. Yeah. You know, I don't know how else to put it. You just know that you have to hold yourself together. And when we got to his hospital room, the last thing you want to be in that room is any kind of negative energy. It all had to be about being together and being positive and being there for him and trying to communicate through your aura or your energy or whatever you're putting out there to the world that you love him and you care about him and you want him to stay with you.
Yeah. Do you tire of these questions? Does this get a bit much?
Sometimes they are. Well, I guess I understand that everyone has to ask the same questions for the same background, but yeah.
Yeah. At what point did you decide, all right, we're going to start a foundation. We're going to make a change? I know you said you talked with your husband, you decided you had to do something, but deciding you're going to do something and actually doing it is a much bigger process.
Well, while Matt was in the hospital, people began to send cards and emails and actually money to help us with medical bills. And college students would send $1, you know, you need to go get a cup of coffee or you need to go get a Coke or something. It was very sweet. It was very moving. And after Matt had died, we had some money and knew that spending it on hospital bills was not how we wanted to use their thoughtfulness. So we thought, well, this is what we'll do. We'll start this foundation, this nonprofit, to help other young people. I'm sure the IRS was very flummoxed at getting, you know, a query for a 501c3 with money and no plan. I'm sure that was very strange for them, but we managed to acquire that, always understanding that this was going to be about young kids. This was going to be about other Matthews, young people who were having problems coping or their families coping, to understand that you are who you are, and it's a beautiful thing. That was always our goal.
How did you find out Matthew was gay?
He called me when he was in college. He was a freshman. And told me, and I asked him, what took you so long to tell me? Because I already pretty much knew. I think people who tell me they just didn't know, they did know. I'm certain. People know. Maybe they're not ready to admit it to themselves that they know, but they know. Any
anger? Any upset? No. Any disappointment?
No. You are who you are. If you think you're disappointed by that, it's a whole other issue. What I was concerned, because the only information you ever hear about the gay community back then was bias and bigotry and fear and violence. It was not ever good. No happy pictures, no happy stories. It was all the negative parts of the gay world. So as a parent, you worry about your child anyway, but throw in the gay component, it goes up exponentially.
Well, then take me further back. When you say you already kind of knew and wondered what took him so long, when you started to realize that, was there ever, just from wherever you were at, a sadness, a disappointment, and uncomfortableness realizing that about your son?
There was a sadness. There was a sadness. In fact, I would even call it a grieving period. But it's grieving over possibilities, or the loss of an idea, or something like that. It's the loss of a path you thought you were on, but you find out you're not on that path. And also understanding that Matt's life was going to be very hard, very hard. Even in an accepting world, society just doesn't seem to want to come around to the fact that you are who you are, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So there was a sadness. I was not disappointed that he was gay. You just, you are who you are. The traditional always thinking that you're going to go to the wedding where you have a bride and a groom and, the beautiful white dress and the tuxedo. And I thought, well, maybe his partner in life will want to wear a wedding dress, or Matt will want to wear a wedding dress. I don't know, but it's all going to be good.
I'm sure there are people out there who don't like hearing you say that, who don't like hearing you be so accepting. How do you address people who have this feeling so built into them that it's a part of them, it's what they believe so completely, and they don't see it as hate? They believe it's the way things are supposed to be, and that you're trying to change the order of the world. How do you address that?
Well, it's very difficult. I understand there's a belief system, built into every person for whatever reason. I just think that they haven't taken the time to actually get to know people in the gay community, if this is what they feel. They're still believing only in the stereotypes and the sad things that have happened in the gay community, the AIDS crisis, and not understanding how women can love women and men can love women. They're so locked into a tradition that really is a tradition that's modern. I wish they would just take the time to learn. They're locked in an ignorance, a lack of information that's detrimental to themselves and society as a whole.
So how do you make that change? How do you get them to start thinking? Because I think the people you need to reach are the last ones who are going to listen to you.
Well, the members of the gay community and their families need to come out. We all need to talk about it. People in the closet are hurting the community as a whole because their coworkers need to know they're gay. They need to be role models for the rest of the world who has a lack of information about the gay community. We have to erase the stereotype that the village people represent the gay community, because they don't.
I've heard you talk before, and you made a separation between tolerance and acceptance.
Yeah.
And tolerance isn't something that you want to hear people say.
No,
Why?
You tolerate bad hair days. You don't tolerate people. You accept people. You accept them for who they are, because they have no say in the matter. You are who you are. And we just need to learn to accept that and respect them. At the very least, respect them for being fellow human beings on this planet in this day and time.
To change to a different note for a minute here, something that really fascinates me about the story, and I wonder how you, your husband, your family deal with the fact that Matthew became so much more than just your son, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but became, in some ways, an icon, became this symbolic person, and from the image of him being tied to a fence which wasn't even accurate, and all of these things. How does a family deal with something that becomes so much bigger than anything that was reality?
I always try to remind people that Matt was just a young man in search of his life. He was not an icon by any means. He was just like every other college student in existence. Questions, issues, drinking too much, all those things. So I just try to remind people that he's just like everyone else. The fact that other people have taken this image and made it into something else is not fair to Matt, but there's really nothing I can do about that other than to remind people that he wasn't.
How do you get, and I keep coming back to this, but it amazes me hearing you talk, and you say, I just have to remind myself, I just have to know that this isn't what, how do you get such control over this? I think at points, and maybe you have just been so taken by it all emotionally and all that. How do you get to the point that you can handle it, that you can step back and say, I have to know this is what I can do, this isn't what I can do, this is what I can accept and I can't. How do you find those limits?
I wish I had an answer for that. I don't. I started out with this as just being Matt's mom and a wife and a mother to my other son, and I just understand that there's a dynamic going on here that isn't really part of me, and I can only be in control of what I can be in control of. I do my best to maintain that role. I don't want to be overwhelmed by what other people think and do. That's their part of this. It's not my part of this.
Yeah. When you go out and speak, and you go to the different groups and the student organizations and out into the community, what are you trying to achieve with that?
Well, if I get the choir, which is people who already are thinking along the same lines, I want them to be re-energized and understand that outside their protected bubble are people who need them to be role models. If I get people in the audience who are not part of the choir, what I want them to understand is, from my perspective, what happens when hate goes unchecked.
Can you make a difference?
Yes.
How?
Anyone who can speak positively about the gay community, whether they're a member or an ally, a parent, a sibling, can make a difference. Because we all need to talk about it. We can't let it remain a mystery, because things don't change until people understand. And the only way to get them to understand is to educate them and talk about it.
When people talk about hate crime, some people say all crimes are crimes of hate. How do you differentiate? How do you say this is a hate crime? What does that mean? Nobody loves someone that they cause pain to. How do you see all of that?
Well, I think every crime has an element of hate. Every crime has a motive, and for hate crimes, the motive is hate. It's not so easy to say that this crime is a hate crime. You have to have an extreme level of proof to carry this through. But some crimes are committed solely on the basis of hate. And they're committed to send a message. They are committed to frighten the community, to intimidate a collection of people, not just the individual. A cross burning on the lawn isn't really meant to frighten the person who owns that piece of property. It's meant to frighten everybody. We know what that means. It's meant to frighten everybody. There's a difference. But to say that it's special laws for special people, well, that's not really right either, because the categories, we all belong to those categories. We are all an ethnicity, a religion, a gender, a sexual orientation. They really protect us all, but we need the categories to define why this is happening and see what we can do to alleviate it.
When you see the dramatizations of your life and the story, how does that affect you?
Well, they're not about me. They're dramatizations. They're not even remotely close to who I am, or the story, or what happened. So it's a way to tell a story in general to the public, to open their eyes to the situation, but it's not about me.
Are those good tools to have out there, though?
Yes.
Do you encourage them, or do they bother you?
I do, to a point. There were some that were good and some that were not, but they have all affected people in a good way. So I'm not going to say don't watch this or don't watch that, because the demographic of MTV getting all these letters saying from these young people, we didn't understand what those words meant and what harm they cause. We'll never do that again.
Yeah. I knew that there was a time when the Laramie Project, you hadn't seen it.
No.
Have you seen it since?
No.
No. Is it's too hard to see, or is it there's not an interest in seeing it?
Well, I lived it. You know, I don't think I just don't feel the need to see it. Maybe someday. I've had this discussion with Moises Kaufman, who put it all together, one of the writers in the Tectonic Theater group, and I said, Moises, I just don't know if I want to do that. And he said, Judy, I just don't think you should see it. So I just haven't felt the need to do that yet.
What are the needs you still have? What are the things you want to do?
Well, I want people to understand that we're all just human beings. That's really my goal, is just equality for everybody. Legally, all the legal rights should go to the gay community. Social education should be just a part of trying to understand who we are. I don't like having to separate the gay community from the straight community, and in a perfect world, we wouldn't need to. We wouldn't need to show how differently the gay community is treated, but it's necessary now to do that. I don't want to have to do that anymore.
Could you have imagined 30 years ago that you would be such a spokesperson for gay rights and anti-crimes?
No, never. And to be honest, if what hadn't happened to Matthew, I would be the mom baking cookies at PFLAG meetings. I would not be doing this. public speaking was my worst nightmare. But this isn't really public speaking for me. This is I'm telling my story to my friends, and I want them to help me change the world.
What about the critics out there who say, enough already? We've heard the story, all the images we saw, all the movies, everything's made. Enough. We're done with this story. What do you say to them?
Well, obviously we're not, because it hasn't changed. We still have hate crimes against the gay community. We still don't have a federal law. Many states don't have laws to protect the gay community. You still can't collect on your tax benefits because you're not allowed to marry. Obviously, we haven't seen it enough.
Yeah. What is your day like now?
I get on the plane, go to some town, go to the hotel, change my clothes, go to a venue, back to the hotel, back to the airport, another plane, another day. About 5 months out of the year, I do this in colleges, and summer I do corporations.
If you weren't doing it, what would you be doing?
I don't know.
And I guess I ask that saying, does this help you with the grief? Does this help you with Matthew? Does it keep him close to you by doing this work?
Well, it does. It allows me to feel like I'm actually helping other Matts, other members, his friends and community. I get to tell stories about Matt, and they never say, Judy, you told us that story yesterday. I get to tell it, as many times as I want to, and it is part of my grieving process. When I first started doing it, I felt like it allowed the audience members to also grieve and to see that I was doing okay, and then they would be okay. And I would see in their eyes such fear and despair when I would talk to them. I don't see that so much anymore. It's hope now, and that's very encouraging.
Earlier when I asked you about Matthew becoming an icon and becoming larger than life, in some ways, do you ever lose sight of Matthew, the boy you knew, to Matthew, the foundation you're working for? How do you keep that in check?
That's really hard. There have been times when I felt like I talk about him so much it's not real anymore. I think if I did this all the time, that would be a bigger issue than it is. Because when in my downtime, I can go back through, family photos and memorabilia and talk to my husband and my younger son and friends about who Matt really was, what a mischief maker he was, how argumentative he was, and how sometimes you just wished he would stop talking. I'm sure that as his mom, when I do programs, I make him seem more perfect than he was. I'm his mom. I'm allowed to do that, But there are times when I feel like I've lost sight of who Matt really was.
Yeah. There's a lot of things, images, stuff like that are still out there that project him. I remember a few years back, the series Smallville had an ad that went out, and a lot of people got very upset about that. Do things like that affect you?
I saw that ad for Smallville, and it never occurred to me that it was remotely related to Matt, because I knew people were seeing that as related to Matt because of the original stories of how he was tied to the fence. I knew that's what was getting to them. I knew the truth, so that image didn't even occur to me until I started reading about it. I understood where it came from, but it's not about Matt. It's people see what they want to see, and they hear what they want to hear. They have to deal with it.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the new project you're working on with the foundation.
Well, we've done several things with the foundation. It's just been great. Really terrific people working with us. We did a documentary about homeless gay and lesbian youth, which was just huge, a huge problem. We did a photography book with positive depictions of the gay community, something Matt always said was lacking for him. And right now we're working on an educational supplement for preschool through 12th grade, using peer mentoring and a storybook and activities where you actually physically get to feel what it's like to be on the fringe, if you will, what it's like to be not part of the group and to be bullied and persecuted, and how you can actually do something about it. It's very important for us.
If I understand correctly, too, your philosophy is it's got to start at home with the parents before you get into school. Because once you get in there, you start getting the peer groups and all of that. But if everyone comes in with a better understanding, you can hopefully stop all of this.
You can. It has to be a community effort. You have to keep reinforcing it as a community. Now, that's idealistic to think that that's actually what's going to happen. That's why the reinforcement has to continue in homes where it works, and in schools where it works, and in community programs where it works. but it's a constant reinforcement. You can't just do it 1 year and hope that everybody remembers it, because too many outside influences come into play.
There are parents, especially in our viewing audience, that'll say, but they're small children. How do you explain this to them? How do you get them? How do you address things such as gay issues to children that are so young that don't have a full understanding of this? How do you teach them the tolerance of something you're not even talking about in your home?
Well, we're not teaching them tolerance. We're teaching them acceptance.
Yes, sorry.
And respect. It's just that one word, respect. We don't have to break it down into categories. We don't have to do it ever. If we just learn to respect each other. Do we need to understand that there are differences? Well, I think there are differences. We are all the same, yet we are all different. Different philosophies, different appearances, different, all sorts of things. You just need to respect everybody for who they are and understand that this is who they are. Now later, kids have questions about, well, why does Jimmy have two daddies and no mommy? And, those are questions kids are going to ask. But if you start with the very simple concept of respecting one another, explaining these issues become no big deal. And we know that the gay issue especially is generational. It's generational. The demographic 18 to 29, no big deal. They get it. It's older than that begins to have issues.
Will it make you happy or sad when you're not desired as a speaker anymore?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. I'll miss all the wonderful people that I meet when I'm traveling, but I will be relieved to actually not to have to get on an airplane every day.
And to know that the work you've done has actually
has
happened.
made a difference, yeah.
Well, Judy, I can't thank you enough for sitting down and talking with us today, and I'm sorry about what you had to go through, but I'm so happy that you were able to move forward and do what you are doing and helping the people you are.
Thank you, Ernie. I appreciate the opportunity.
Judy Shepard. To order a transcript, call 866-652-3378 or send $6.95 to the address on your screen. Please include the name of the guest.